Hey everybody, it's Wednesday night and we're going to take a quick trip around the world. I've been out all day, just got in, it's almost 8 o'clock already, so we're going to walk around the fish room together. I haven't even been in here all day, so I don't know if we're going to find a dead fish floating in the tank or who knows, but here we go, we're going to go around the world. 29-gallon miscellaneous. I did a water change on this tank this week. It could probably use a little more maintenance on it. All I did was a quick water change and filter change, and I removed a bunch of the floating water sprite in there. But I can see now that I'm looking at it a little more closely, it's got a few dead fronds of Java Fern down there. They could be plucked out, and it's got some stuff collected on the filter intake that I could have cleaned off. But I did do the filter change, I did do the water change, and that's the important part. And then, of course, other than that, nothing else is really going on in this tank. Haven't really done much of anything. No new additions, no losses, or anything like that. But it's still looking pretty good. The clown pleco I put in there is still in there. And you can see how clean everything looks and how good everything looks in there. I always love it when one of my loaches is hiding in that little cichlid stone and you can see his little nose sticking out. And he just kind of lays his chin on the doorway and looks out. I love my loaches. Cool little fish. So moving right along, we're going to the 55-gallon Gourami tank. I can't think of anything going on in this tank this week either. I definitely need to get in here. This is the next tank on my list to get in and do some work on. I need to trim back my water sprite. My red tiger lotus. I told you this is a pretty slapdash video. I just grabbed the camera and here we go. So I got to collect my thoughts as we do it. My red tiger lotus there to the right, this stuff with all these big red leaves on it. You can see I've got another little runner that's made it up to the top and is floating across the surface, so we need to get that out of there. And then, as always, we've just got so much big, thick, broad leaves in there. It really just blocks a lot of the water flow and a lot of the light to the bottom. So I'll trim one or two leaves out of that. You can see down here I've got some new shoots coming out, new growth coming in. So that's always good. It's been a little while since I removed the massive clump of Java Fern up here in the corner. The piece I put back in is not really attached to the wood anymore. It's actually just kind of floating there. You can see the rhizome completely detached from the wood. Where it should be attached is up here, and then of course you can see the rhizome is over here. This little bit is actually attached to the wood and growing onto it, so that's why I'm not worried about this chunk. That's actually going to come out and go into my bucket where I keep it, where I sell it. So again, if you're interested, check out the description below. You'll see my email, and I do sell the Java Fern. I've got some massive chunks of it available right now, as we'll see when we go around the room. You'll see some of my other tanks have had some work done. Other than that, not a lot going on. My chocolate gourami is still doing well, still eating well, and my whiptail catfish, while I don't see it at the moment, is still in there doing well. Gave me a scare the other day. I couldn't find it, and I looked and looked and looked and looked, and I could not find it. And then eventually I saw it hiding on the piece of woodwork in there, and it was just lying in there so still and perfectly hidden behind that tiger lotus that I didn't even notice it. But once I did notice it, I saw that it was alive and well. It's got a nice round, full belly. Whenever I put my algae wafers in there, it goes right after them and gets a good meal out of them. So I'm not concerned about it eating or anything. My only concern was the water, and that doesn't seem to be an issue either. So moving along. Oh, and I will say, even though it's under stuff, I'm one of those people that if you set something down, I pile stuff on top of it, including an old Kit Kat wrapper apparently. That big box is my new Sun filter, so that filter there is the one that I said was leaking when I pumped it. It doesn't leak when it's running, but when I pumped it to get it restarted, every time I pumped, water was squirting out around the edges. So I did get a new filter, just haven't done anything with it yet. I am going to shoot some video about that coming up here in the near future, because I'm going to do something to it before I put it on the tank, and I want to talk about what I'm going to do to it to sort of get it ready to go on the tank. My 55-gallon T-bar tank. Shot a little video on this tank this week. I put some fresh eggshells in here, as I do from time to time. I've mentioned shooting a video about my Siamese algae eaters, because I'm really happy with these. I still have the 2 of them in there, just fantastic fish, but I haven't gotten around to shooting that video yet. Talked a little bit about how my Anubias are growing so well. You can see the new growth is just going crazy. These little things are the remains of the flowers that were in there. I actually had to cut the flower heads off, and now that I'm looking at it, I think that is actually going to be a new leaf. This little thing right here is not another flower head. I think that's going to be a new leaf coming in. So we did a nice big water change, and I did a gravel vac on this because the fish poop was just loading up like crazy, and you can see it already sort of is. That is a result of my power head being down here on this end, blowing across the back. The idea is nothing will get settled in on the back. It'll all move it down towards this end where my filter intake is, and what happens is everything that goes past there swirls around, and this is where it loses enough energy that all the stuff sort of settles out of it. And that's fine, because it makes it nice and easy for me to get in there and just stick the gravel rack right in this corner, and the bulk of everything that gets collected is right up here in this front corner. So having that power head in the back, and that's pretty much how I set all my tanks up. Power head in the back, blowing sort of down and across, and then the filter intake on this end. And then while I may have to gravel vac this kind of stuff occasionally, or stuff may accumulate at the far end or whatever, that difficult to get to area in the back underneath of the power or the spray bar and everything, that I never have to worry about because it's got so much water flow across. And again, I set pretty much all my tanks up the same way. If you ever have noticed that just about all of them have a power head in the bottom left, and then the intake is on the far bottom right hand side, and that's just what seems to work pretty well for me. Oh, and I do have another flower right here. This is another Anubias flower that I did not cut out. That's actually an older one, so I must have missed that the other day when I got in there and cut the other ones out. Other than the water change and the fresh eggshells, which I promised in my other video you would hardly be able to see after a few days, and there you go, it's been a few days and you can hardly notice some of this white stuff here in the back, and then some of this white stuff right here where the T-bar is now blocking it out of the way. Those are the eggshells, but other than that, can't really notice them. So moving on, my 40-gallon Black Ghost knife fish tank. Had another one of my lights go out on this tank. Got the T5 high output fluorescence on here, and the fixtures I use are fairly low budget for this type of fixture. Any kind of high output T5 type fixture is going to be fairly expensive, especially if it comes with tubes in it already, which these do. And you know, I've had decent success with them, but it's hit or miss. I've had a few that have not really worked, or that have just chewed through tubes. You know, every 6 months they seem to be burning out another tube. And so this one is one that I've had issues with before. This is one that just every so often I have to replace the tubes in it. So I think I'm done with this fixture. I don't think I'm going to replace the tubes in that fixture. I think I'm just going to get rid of that fixture. But that leaves me down to one fixture. If you're wondering why I'm talking about it, because the tank is so well lit. This used to have 2 fixtures on it. You can see here's the one that's not working. And then, of course, I've got the other one. So I used to have a fixture across the back and then another one right here across the front. So now I just have the one in the center, and it makes the tank look a lot different. And the tank has sort of grown into the amount of light that it was used to having in there. And while I'll grant you 4 high output T5s is an awful lot of light to have on a 40-gallon tank, it's what the tank was used to. So now that the plants in there have gotten used to that much light shining on them, a big change, you know, having the amount of light that they're getting is going to have a big impact on them. So I got to do something to either bring the light back up, at least spread the light back out, or just suffer the consequences and prepare for my tank to undergo some changes in the plant department. And now that I'm standing here actually looking at it, I probably ought to get in there and give this tank a haircut too. I can see some dead, you know, leaves in here. They need to be groomed out. I got some dead stuff going on in here. Everything else is just growing so well. I don't want to get in there and disturb it too much. I really need to get in there and sort out this mess. It's got this weird stuff growing in it that I don't even know what it's called. I don't even know how it got in the tank. I don't ever remember putting it in there, but I've got big globs of it now. It looks like the blob, and pieces of it break off and float around in the tank and settle in new places. So whatever that stuff is, that's in there. And then of course my Java Fern is growing crazy out of control, and I usually wind up finding like algal growth and stuff like that, like on the top of it, right where it's directly under those bright lights. So we'll have to get in there and do a little bit of work getting that cleaned up too. So moving along, my 125 gallon native tank. Not a lot to talk about in this tank, and honestly, I shoot so much video of this tank. This is one of the ones that's just like a regular for me. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one because I feel like I spend a lot of time on this tank all the time anyway. Nothing new going on in here. I haven't done a water change in the last week or so. I haven't added any new fish or anything. We do still have at least 4 crayfish in there, and now that I'm looking, we can see not only the crayfish right here, but if you see that little sort of pale thing back there, that's a carapace. That's like the back plate of one. So I'm not sure if that's from a slough, you know, or a molt, whatever you call it, or if that's from a dead crayfish. And that little guy right there is another crayfish. And I pretty much always see him in that spot. So that's his house. This is another little crayfish house where we can see this little guy's claws sticking out. And my big temple plant that was here in the middle is finally gone. That's just been brutalized. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, we can see the remains of my temple plant right there. That's what all of that is. So no doubt that was the crayfish got to it. Crayfish devour plants. It's impossible to keep crayfish in a planted tank. Well, I mean, it's not impossible. It's just impossible to keep a planted tank with crayfish in it. It won't stay planted for long. It'll turn into a non-planted tank pretty quickly. I don't care. I'm just going to throw more plants in there, let them eat them. I throw plants away by the bucket full when nobody wants to buy them, like I said. So I've got gobs and gobs and gobs of Java Fern that I can stick in this tank, and that'll make it look nice and green, and it'll give the crayfish something to munch on. Again, I shoot tons of video of this tank. Just go ahead and look up my native tank playlist if you're interested in any more videos of this tank. Nothing actually new to talk about, so let's move on. Snail tank, likewise, nothing new to talk about. It's just a snail tank. It's got lots of snails breeding in it. And my Gudgeon tank. This is another 40 breeder. And it's one that I keep talking about doing something with, but I haven't yet got in there and done anything with it. It's well maintained. All the water's fine and fresh. I recently replaced the filter. I was having issues with an actual leaking filter. It's actually still sitting on the floor right there. I never have done anything once I disconnected it, so I'm probably going to take that outside before I open it. It's been sitting there for, I don't know, week, 10 days, 2 weeks. Time just gets away from me. I have no idea. But it's been sitting there for a long time, and I guarantee it is funky on the inside, so I am not going to be opening that one up down here in the basement. But I did put the new filter on the tank. It's a hang on the back filter, and that's why this side of the tank now is so open. We've got that real forceful water flowing in, and it's just, you know, you can see the way everything's moving around in the current, and it's just a different water flow. The way I had the spray bar in there before on the canister filter allowed the water to just sort of flow across the top, and then I had it flowing straight down the back. It didn't do a lot of in the tank movement because the Gudgeon doesn't like a lot of water flow. So this still isn't a ton of water flow throughout the tank, but it is different water flow, and that sort of changed the way everything looks in there. I also pulled some stuff out when I got in there and did that, so you know, I have done some work on this tank here fairly recently. The Gudgeon still just sitting in there. My little bumblebee catfish still lives down here in the bottom corner, and now that I'm thinking about it, I have not seen my rubber lip pleco since I did the work, but I'm sure it's still in there. The tank is still nice and clean. Everything is still scraped clean and beautiful. And again, it was in there a week or 10 days ago or whenever I did the filter work. So unless it's died since then I'm assuming it's still in there alive and well. So one of these days I'm going to get in there, put new lights on it, because it's got those cheap DIY lights on it that are just really not enough to make this tank as lighted as it should be. And then of course the real thing is going to be thinning out that Java Fern. So once again, I will have plenty of Java Fern available if anybody's interested to buy any. Check my email down in the description below. I've always got Java Fern. I've got loads of the stuff. So that will be getting thinned out, and this tank will look a whole lot different once you can actually see into the tank again. Moving on, we've got a tank we can actually talk about. I've done something to this week. last night as a matter of fact, or possibly the night before. As I said, time gets away from me. My 125 here did a big water change and did a bunch of removal of plants. Did a big bunch of removal of plants. I got all of the water sprite that was floating over on this side, and I separated out just a few of the cleaner, less contaminated offspring, the little baby water sprite up there. And then I throw away the whole huge mass that was floating in there because it just had that green stuff all over it. The Java fern that was growing in the middle, I pulled out. I shot a video of it, showed in a bucket, and it's just huge masses of it. I pulled that chunk out, and then I pulled a big chunk right here out, and I pulled a big chunk right there out. So I took out about 5 pounds of Java fern and about 15 pounds of water sprite, and now the tank is nice and wide open. And this end is where I'm actually kind of interested to see, like, now that I can see in there and all that floating water sprite is gone, it's a veritable garden down on this end. Look at all the stuff I've got going on. I got Anubias and Java and Apanagitan, and I got not even sure what species it is, but this is some sword that's been in there forever, and I'd just forgotten about it. It had basically died off down to just the rhizome, but was still growing, and it was growing in that direction, and it hit the glass and was going up the glass. So I ripped it off of the piece of wood it was growing to, turned it around, and got the growing end going this way. And I thought I killed it when I did that, because that was over a year ago, and I just again sort of forgotten that it was even in there. And now when we look at it, if you look right down there, you can see I've got not only new growth, new leaves, I've got new roots coming out. The rhizome's doing really well and growing in the direction I want it to. So this whole area back here with all those swords and everything is actually turning out pretty good. And then this little bit of green right here is Java fern that is actually attached to that wood, so that is rooted to it and growing, whereas this piece is simply just tucked under the edge of the wood, between the wood and the rock. And that, again, I removed a huge mass of it that was right there, took a little piece off, replaced a little piece back, and then removed the huge mass of it so we can actually get some water flow and see into this side of the tank. My red tiger lotus that I put in here a while ago and had completely forgotten that I'd put in here has shot some leaves up, and that's looking really good. And then, of course, the Apanagitan, which is this real long, grassy, stringy looking stuff. That stuff's growing like a weed in there. That stuff's growing like crazy. I've actually got babies in the other room. I've got a baby one floating in this tank already that I didn't even know was in there. There's a look at my long fin bristlenose. We don't get to see her out and about very often. She's one of my more timid plecos. And then, of course, now that we've got the light in the tank, we can see my chocolate zebra plecos down here a little more easily. We got another one hiding back there, not quite as easy to see, although he's going to make it nice and easy for us to see. And someone asked me how my little clown loach was doing that was in this tank with the other ones, and there's your answer. It's doing just fine, doing really well. I know for the first couple of weeks I had it in here, it was hiding. I thought maybe the two larger clown loaches were intimidating it, and it was just basically staying right up underneath this piece of rock right there. But it's come out and about ever since then, and it's doing fine. It doesn't seem to bother with the two larger ones. There's my other chocolate zebra pleco down there. That's, of course, my synodontis. And then there's my two larger loaches. They really like hanging out underneath that power head. I don't know if it's the hum or the vibration or the flowing water, but they really spend a lot of time lying on the bottom underneath my power head down there, so I always find that interesting. But those are the big loaches in the tank, and they don't really seem to bother or hassle the little ones, so I'm not really sure what was going on with that for the first week or so that they were all in the tank together, but there you go. And they're all the same age for the most part too, believe it or not. This one just doesn't grow. It's just stayed that size ever since I got it, while the other two down here have grown like gangbusters and are quite large. So moving on, we're going to my 20-gallon angelfish tank. Nothing at all to talk about in this one. I did a simple water change a few days ago. I honestly didn't even change the little hang on the back filter. I was in a hurry, and it was one of those days where I just did like 5 water changes back to back. This is the last one I was doing, like as the lights were going out, and I just changed a few gallons of water out of it real quick and called it good. So probably need to get in there and do a little more maintenance on it. Other than that, again, not a lot going on. Just kind of sitting back, letting it do its thing, letting the plants grow in, letting the fish grow up, and, you know, just watching it as a fish tank. So nothing really to talk about with this one. My quarantine tank down here is now more or less empty. I've got my little resident female guppy. She lives in the tank full time, just so I've always got a cycled tank that's got active living, you know, organisms in it, and it's not just an empty tank sitting here. So it's always got somebody living in it. And then of course I've still got those 2 coolie loaches that are going to be in this tank forever and ever and ever, because I'm never ever going to get them out, and they live underneath the gravel, and I don't ever hardly ever really ever see them. So there are 2 coolie loaches in here. I've just sort of given up on ever thinking of them as anything other than the 2 coolie loaches that live in my quarantine tank. So that's kind of it for this tank. Not a lot to talk about. Hopefully soon we'll be able to put some more stuff in it. I am thinking about adding a couple of female live bearers to my 40-gallon brackish tank here. I'm not sure what I want to do. These are 2 males, and they just do this constantly. They just chase each other around. I guess you could say they're the fish equivalent of very frustrated. And I don't know if I want to put some females in the tank with them. If I do, I would have to probably put at least 3 or 4 females in there. You definitely want more females than males. If I put 1 female in here, it would just be a death sentence. She would just be harassed to death by the 2 males. So in order to give the females a break, you need to have much higher ratio of females than you do to males. Ideally, if you can have 2 or 3 females to every single male, that is the best way to do it when you've got live bearers. Otherwise, the males just harass the females to death. They're very, very, very persistent. They just never let up, and the poor females just get stressed to death, literally. So my concern is Butterbean. You can see how we came over here to start shooting video, and what has he done? He's gone right into his little cave. He's sitting down there on the bottom. He's kind of laying low. He's the most timid pufferfish I've ever seen in my life. He's so docile and shy. If he's out eating and the 2 mollies come over and start acting like this near where he's eating, he'll sort of go away, even if they're not bothering him directly. You can see he's doing it now. He just kind of, you know, I don't want nothing to do with this, guys, and he just sort of backs away. So for me to add 3 more or 4 more live bearers in this tank, the tank can handle the bioload without any issue or whatever. I just don't know if poor little Butterbean down there can handle the stress load. The other option, of course, is to separate the mollies and just take one of those males out of there and put that in a different tank, and that is an option too. But I really do want to keep these orange sail fins in brackish water so that we can see them in their full glory, because they really are beautiful fish, and when I ever get around to getting some proper lighting on this tank, we'll get to see them a little more clearly. So last to note on this tank, you can see very clearly my red cyanobacteria problem was not completely cleared out last time I got in here and did some work on this. So finally we're going to look real quick at my garden tank. I just got warned that my battery is running out, so hold your eyes. Nothing really to speak of here. Some of the plants have made their way outside. I've kind of lost interest in a few of them. This was sort of more of an afternoon something to do. It was fun to slap together one day, and I've not really paid much attention other than the plants. I haven't paid much attention to the fish or the fish tanks since I've put it up. So I have noticed that I've got a couple of the little minnows that I had in here died. I've got at least 2 dead minnows that I've taken out of this tank. And I also noticed yesterday that the sunfish in this tank up here are actually getting, you know, maybe yay big. And possibly that's why some of the minnows are dying. Some of the sunfish might be getting aggressive. So my truck is actually in the shop at the moment, and I'm going to be stuck at the house for the next several days while I'm getting some work done on that. And hopefully now that I spent most of today sleeping and getting caught up on all that, I'm hoping that tomorrow will be a day to get down here and start tinkering with this tank, and maybe we can start doing something with my garden tank, because I do have plans. Oh, and we can see, I noticed that I saw some movement in the water, and it's actually the one sunfish is chasing the other sunfish, so they're already getting aggressive and territorial. You know, at that size, I can't even keep two of them in a 20-gallon long tank, albeit half full. So, you know, they've got the footprint, they just don't have the depth. And even in this tiny little tank, they're already starting to fight and chase each other. So look forward to some video of this tank coming up here pretty soon. We'll get a good look at those sunfish. We'll move the tank around, we'll pull these plants out of the way and see what's going on with all this, and we'll shoot some video coming up on this. And then down here, my red claw crab tank, I plan on doing some work with that too, and all of that will be coming up here on this whole sort of garden tank area in the very near future. So that was it. I'm going to go before my battery goes completely. We are all the way back to where we started, albeit with a lot of glare on it now, but this again is my 29-gallon miscellaneous tank. Make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.